Everyone, good morning. Welcome back to the Service and Support track. We have a strong lineup of talks today. If you have gone to any of the Service and Support tracks, just as a reminder, you probably know we formally entered into the IT market about 5 years ago when we released your service desk. And since then, we've been focusing on empowering IT teams and service teams to deliver great service to their end users. So up next, we have a really exciting, in-depth talk about how to take lean and agile practices from software development and apply them to ITSM practices. And we're very lucky to have our ITSM experts here in the house, Paul Buffington and Vidhu Sharma. Some fun facts about them. Paul is actually famous on Instagram. You can ask him about it after the talk. And if he could have any superpower in the world, he would want to be able to teleport so that he could attend multiple baseball games in one day. And Vidhu's special skill is that he can lick both of his elbows at the same time. Maybe he'll show us. And his favorite food is Vegemite pizza. And if you don't know what Vegemite is, you're lucky if you've never tried it. So if everybody could please welcome Paul and Vidhu to the stage.
All right, so let's get started. Thanks, Molly. So I'm excited to be here with Paul, second time around in Barcelona for the summit. Now, it's great to be back. We thank you for your participation and patience. And today we'll walk you through a journey around tips and tricks and best practices to get a lean and agile ITSM machine running for you. So it's a belief that has inspired our origins. All great human achievement is encompassing incredible teamwork. And we believe our mission is to unleash the potential in every team. Now, if you come to think of it, when you think about ITSM, there are many teams at play. You have a service team, you have a service desk team, you have IT teams and operation teams. So for them to be successful, you really need to unleash the potential by diversity, tools, technology, and processes, which we will look in the next few slides. The fundamental drivers of success and the pillars behind every successful initiative are three things, three elements: people, process, and technology. People is all about culture. And you must have heard in the town hall yesterday by Aubrey the importance of bringing diversity in. I cannot stress more enough that how important it is to think about people and culture. With process, this is the work that you do. So you need to have the best people with the right knowledge and diversity in the house, but it's also the work, the process that delivers the output, and technology is just an enabler to get all these things together. And the next few slides, let's click down a level deeper and see what this means. So much of the world today works in closed ways. While this is not intentional, sometimes it does happen that perspectives are lost, information is kept on the table, there is team friction. So one thing at Atlassian we truly believe is about being open. And not just being open with your teams, but being open about the way you work, open about the business, open about diversity, and open about inclusion. So here are a few examples, a few snippets around what does a closed team versus an open team look like. Now, like I said, teams intentionally don't engage in these behaviors, but it's sometimes the environment and the culture that happens to pick and choose some of these. For example, instead of having a knowledge base, knowledge is lost because just a few people or individuals or teams have that knowledge. Inflexible processes versus flexible processes and acceptance to tools. Inclusion versus exclusions. So these are the few key behaviors that define what a closed team would look like from an open one. So when you talk about building strong teams, like I said, it's one of the most critical aspects of building a modern IT service management and agile machine. So think about three things. You need to bring in diversity. Diversity not just in the people and their skills, but also in the way they think. So you want to have diverse people on your teams who can think and bring a different solution to the table every time. Invest in a culture of collaboration and innovation. And build empathy across teams. It is hard work, but if you're sick, that's the medicine you need to take. We live in a services-first world. If you think about the digital transformation and great success stories of companies like Airbnb, VMware, so to speak a few, they've really put a lot of digital services and transformations to deliver that experience to their customers. And it's not just companies like those. Even traditional businesses like banking, retailing, insurance, and underwriting are now using digital transformation techniques to deliver great services. And behind the curtains, there is a strong culture and an ITSM practice that's going in with flavors of DevOps now, as we go into the future. And these ways are impacting how IT services team think and envision delivery, doing more with less. So here's a stat. As per the Forbes report, 37% of senior executives have reported that a majority of their IT spend goes in keeping the lights on, or business as usual. This is not fun, because if you're spending a majority of your investments in areas like keeping the lights on, you are removing the opportunity to invest in innovations and doing great things. So let's take a quick look at the pain points with traditional ITSM solutions today. The first one is the inability to drive innovation. Well, that's right. If you're investing major parts of your investments for keeping the lights on, like the previous slide, you're not investing in technology and innovation. You should be doing that not as a byproduct, but as a conscious practice. If the self-service is deficient, because the current ITSM solutions make it difficult for your customers to embrace, say, a service portal or just the tool itself, it's difficult to use that ITSM tool. Lack of visibility. Teams don't want to create silos, but if lack of visibility exists, silos automatically get created. And that's where you have to start breaking down the silos, and Paul is going to talk us through great tips and tricks of how you can actually do that with our tools and thinking. The next set of pain points are around the difficulty to adapt. So customers, sometimes they love out-of-the-box solutions, but sometimes they have some niche requirements. So if your ITSM tool does not allow you to make those customizations, there's a pain in the system already. No coordination with dev. I know that a lot of you are trying to embrace DevOps in a certain way, but if your tools don't bring your devs and ops together, I think there's something that needs to be fixed and a conversation that you need to have. And obviously, high support costs. So the higher the cost, the more you take away from doing innovative and creative things and investing in the right areas, and you just try to do firefighting and fixing the leaks that exist. So what's happening? The ITSM mindset is shifting. Today's customers want more. They want a flawless service, and IT teams and IT service managers are under the same pressure of delivering more with less. So in response to this, IT teams are now switching to a leaner, more agile approaches to delivering service management by jumping over things like complex knowledge bases, inflexible workflows, and just making it simple for customers to use. So let's talk about the Atlassian's approach to ITSM. I think it's pretty straightforward. The first thing is around collaboration. And we are a team that believe in unleashing the potential of teams, and I really advocate about being open. So when you think about collaboration, think about seamless ways by which your team can have those meaningful conversations, have those tough discussions, they can start collaborating. The second thing is agility. Trying to apply agile principles is a way to deliver value to your customers, which brings me to my third and most important point is around value. So value is not just a document that you publish or a report that you have, but it is actually demonstrating that customers are receiving value, agents are faster, and the business is benefiting by these investments in your ITSM solutions. So with that, I'd like to bring Paul on stage, who will walk you through the key areas of IT service management and best practices.
Thank you, Vidhu. So it's really good to be with you this morning, and I'm going to take you through, I wish I had more time. I could spend probably a couple hours on this topic. One thing I love about being at Atlassian is the open way that we collaborate across the teams, as well as I work with customers on a regular basis. As part of the enterprise team, as a solution engineer, I'm meeting with customers at least once or twice a week. So that learning continues on. I'm learning from customers. My counterpart, Ian Buchanan, He's our DevOps principal within the team. We spent a lot of time just really challenging one another. How should teams be working? What are you hearing? And so a lot of this comes out of that in addition to weekly conversations with Vidu. We spent a lot of time together. So I had to pick 3 processes. And I picked the 3 that are most common for customers. And what I want to give you is hopefully some insights that you can take away. Notice that Agile is not in front of ITSM. It's not Agile ITSM. It's ITSM that is using Agile and lean ways of working. It's something that you start on a journey, you invest in, you learn from, and it evolves over time. And I'm seeing this with so many different teams today. So let's get started. Service request management is the face of the IT today. Self-service, being able to interact with IT through multi-channel support. We think of the portal, I'll talk a lot about that, but I think it's so important. And I'm also amazed at the number of customers that struggle of being able to get that compelling offering out to their customers. One of the things that we've found in deploying self-service is that the reason it's beneficial is something that we call shift left. It is kind of a bit of a buzzword in IT today, but I think there's some really important things to take away from this, especially when we think about lean and agile ways of working. We want to shift left because we want it to have a more valuable service, a better service that's achieving better business results, and we're moving towards that level 0 because we're getting end users to the answers that they're looking for or finding the help quickly that they need. But we also think about going deeper into those support teams. We're increasing their focus and agility on what they're doing, making them more efficient in that. So this reduces the wait time and waste, so it's very lean in what we're doing, but it also draws on analysis and observation from our environment. So as I've started to we'll talk about knowledge in a few minutes, or the way that I'm delivering this support, maybe other channels that are starting to come online through chat, I can make improvements over time. And so it's that constant learning that's going on in this. Now, when it comes to service management, the driving principle behind this in Agile service management is the customer. They're the highest priority, and they are everything in that. Meaning do I really understand my customers that I'm serving in the business? Or potentially, are there maybe my vendors that I'm supporting? I work with a lot of customers that support external vendors. And so it's always that kind of that principle that's in the back of my mind as I'm going through and understanding what we've currently deployed. So here's the 3 key areas. First, customer focused, in that I understand the needs of those customers for what it is that they're asking for, what it is best in providing that. I was just talking to a customer that deployed self-service, and they had a walk-up service desk, and now they're evolving to the next level in the way that they're going to provide support through chat. So they're bringing in these other channels. But again, they're coming back to, is this delivering to the needs of the organization? Whereas another company I know of that's in the auto manufacturing industry in the US, it is predominantly email. So can they, deliver support there? We know email is not the most efficient. And how can I shift towards self-service over time? Whoops, sorry. Knowledge-centric. I think this is one of the most important ones on this slide. Can I build a knowledge-centric team and put in place capabilities and incentives that motivate that within my teams? Knowledge-centric, that I'm delivering that to my end users so they're finding answers in that, but also my entire teams across all my service teams, tier 1 to tier 3, are incentivized to adding and contributing to that. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then finally, streamlined. What can I automate today? What types of requests can I go in and add an automation, whether it goes all the way to fulfillment or it saves my agent 2 to 3 steps? I'll give you an example. I heard this on a call last week. I thought it was a really good one. This frontline team was getting overloaded with tickets in their queue. And so what they were doing was, if this sat around for more than 2 days without hearing from a customer, customers get easier and users get busy. And so what they do is they actually go through an auto close of the ticket with a really nice automated response back to the end user saying, we're here still to help you. We know that you're busy. Reopen a ticket with us. We're going to go ahead and close this out for now. And I thought that was really interesting. And they found that was accepted by the end users. What they did was they shrunk their current queue to where they could really focus on what's important, because they were getting a lot of noise. That's a small little example of automation. I've seen some other ones where they're using webhooks to go out and fulfill the request. So there's a whole range of that. Now, we can't automate everything, but there's aspects in there that we can automate, and then we can look to streamline and improve the way that we do our process. So aggregating your knowledge, this is really fascinating. And I worked over 10 years consulting in the IT industry, and I've seen a lot of this where knowledge is all over the place. And folks know where that knowledge is, but if I don't have that person to help me find it, it's really challenging. SharePoint came along, and it serves its purpose in some ways, but it still has the silos. So how can I bring that knowledge into one location where I can centralize it that not only accelerates the learning, but helps my team make better decisions and creates knowledge champions? I really have worked with some great companies that they build incentives within their teams that they champion it. So one customer I know of, they do a quarterly review of who's publishing the best and most useful knowledge, both internally as well as used for the customer. And they offer up kudos to them. If someone's being recognized for that extra effort within their job, it's incentivizing the teams. And that's where the culture and the people part come in. Vidhu made that point early on, and I think it's such an important part. Instead of just focusing on the technology, what can I do with the people around that are working with the technology? So 3 things with this. First, invest in the knowledge sharing tools. I love Confluence. I live in the day-to-day, and I work with a lot of customers that use it. I think it's fantastic, and especially around collaborative editing, the integration with Service Desk, some of the things. So investing in those tools have a very significant aspect in what it returns to us because it makes it easy to author. I've worked with many other knowledge publishing tools from the ITSM space. They can be very heavy in that I've got to go through this 6-step process to get my knowledge article published. Well, guess what? I'm not going to publish my knowledge article. I have too many other things to do. If you don't have agents publishing today, the one thing that's great is there's no hindrance to that. There's no barrier. Simply create the article. It's live, or you can put in place saying, well, you've got to go to a draft first because I want you to do a peer review. So it's very adaptable to your process. And I would also encourage you in that, if you haven't done with some of your teams, is to start and go ahead and experiment with that. Go ahead and get the teams publishing the knowledge and figure out who's using it and then learn and grow over time. Peer reviews. This is the other part here, as I mentioned. If I haven't started publishing knowledge, I can go ahead and get this into my process where I can bring a peer review in and make sure that I am getting correct information out there, that it is readable, it's the right information, and that way I'm delivering the very best to my end users or within my internal teams. And then, in fact, there's actually a couple of marketplace apps that can help you along this as well, and I would encourage you to look at those. And then finally, learn and improve. It's something that we just don't do over time, or at one time that all right, let's go ahead and we're going to start publishing knowledge. Set a time window where you're going to go through and say, all right, the next 30 days, we're going to go ahead and focus on this aspect that the team has identified. We get a lot of requests in this area. Let's publish knowledge to it. And then be able to learn how effective was that? Where can I adjust my strategy and my plan so that way you improve and you learn from those ways that you're adjusting your strategy. The Jira Service Desk portal is fantastic in that it is search-centric. So many of what we do today, and I use this within Atlassian as well, is that I can go in, this is the item that I'm looking for, and then I can get to the knowledge article. And so that's where you want to challenge your agents. What are you getting? What's your highest level of request? You can run reports on that saying, these are the top 5 requests that we get. Sit down in a meeting with them, say, what kind of knowledge could you publish out there today that could start to reduce those requests or deliver better satisfaction to your end users as they're interacting with you through self-service? The other thing is just a part of your process in publishing, being able to go in and set it up. So here's an example. I take this from a customer. They use the very basic setup where I can publish to a how-to article, but I come in and automatically set it to a draft. I do not want it live with my end users. I go ahead and set in the team members that are going to go do the review, and then we go through a review process. And over the next couple of days, we've got a review completed, the article is updated, and we're ready to publish. The one thing I like about this is very adaptable to the team. It is not hard set in stone that you have to go through these 5 steps, and you're able to then start to improve upon the way that you're sharing knowledge. Now, if you need something more formal, I'm thinking like Komala or some of the other apps in the marketplace, you can definitely do that. So you can put a more formal process around this. But again, it's not burdensome on the support staff, because if they have a lot on their plate that they're working on, if this is going to add burden to their day-to-day job, they're not going to do it. So what can you do if you're a team lead, a manager of the group, that helps them make it easy for them to share knowledge? One of the things that's really interesting, if you haven't read this report yet, I would highly encourage you. Gartner published a report in 2018. You see the name of the report there. If you Google it, you'll find it. And they looked at what's the future of IT. I believe it's either 2020 or 2022. It's not far out. And one of the, just a lot of fascinating insights. A lot of them I would agree with, because we're seeing that convergence of not only DevOps and ITSM, but the agile ways of working, and they acknowledge it in there. And one of the things they identified that I thought was really fascinating was what they call level Z support. Many of you today probably have multiple tier structures in support. You're, tier 1 to tier, Z. It's somewhere in there. You have, and it makes sense because it's the way we're structured. I'm very much a specialist. I'm going to work in this area. You call me in when you need it. But what we're finding is, because of cloud structures, the new architecture of IT today, it's changing the way that teams work. And what they're saying here is that support teams need to change the way that they're structured. And one thing that we've already seen within Atlassian, it's been really interesting to observe this, is that we're already seeing level Z support. That what used to be a multiple tier team is now, they've taken 2 to 3 tiers and they've collapsed them. And they're able to be much more, and these are just some of the attributes that we found, they're much more customer focused in they're doing. So if I pull in someone that's more of a specialist, simply at an app mention of a Jira, they're in there, they're jumping in saying, yeah, great, glad to help you out with it. The other thing is the open frameworks of working. I'm not siloed into another system, another application. We're able to share and easily work with that. And they love collaboration. One, because of chat ops, because of the way that we can collaborate on Jira. And I think the other thing, as I mentioned to this point, is their knowledge champions. If the knowledge isn't published yet, at least I'm pulling in someone that has information about what's very important in solving this. And the final thing, and this just goes with Lean and Agile, I'm always learning. We're putting this a part of our team meetings. I'm starting to see more and more stand-ups with these types of teams that they've learned from their software counterparts. So as they're going through their weekly stand-ups, or either, I don't know if they do daily, but they're in a stand-up. They're talking about what we're working on, what we're delivering. They're learning through that process. So coming to a couple of things, we focus on the agent. One is balanced work. One of the things we know from a software side of things on Agile, it's all about the flow of work. What can I take for a flow of work? How can I increase that flow without overburdening the team? We can do the same thing with IT support, in that we can leverage the queues in Jira Service Desk. I saw one customer recently that they use an automation rule, a label, and an SLA, and they're moving things into different queues based on what's about ready to go over their work limit. So they're able to kind of balance out what the team is currently working on. So we don't burn the team out, and we're delivering an effective support. So the question is, what are we doing today, and how can we implement work limits or balancing out that workload for our teams to where we have the appropriate level of flow for our teams, especially frontline support. It's unplanned work, it's always coming at them. So what can we do to make them more efficient? Open collaboration, I think, is so key in this. The Jira platform, it's at its very core. Coming from a traditional ITSM world, when I stepped into Atlassian, and I just simply discovered the app mentions and the power of that. A lot of other platforms now have that today, but that's just at the very heart of what we do. But what else can I do around that introduces that, whether it's chat ops? I have a whole section that we get to in the white paper more about it, but there's other strategies in here that I can bring in that make me more collaborative across teams, not just within my given team. And then finally, learning and improving. What are you doing on a regular basis that's taking measure of where you're at and how, in the last month or two, what have been the challenges for the team? And then looking at those metrics. But not only that, and Vito will talk about this at the end, going through a team playbook and being able to assess how's the team working together, not only within the technology, but as a team overall. What can I do there? That's such a key aspect to put these two things together. All right, incident management. This one is near and dear to my heart. I actually spoke at London Sits recently. If you want to find a longer presentation of this section, it's up on my Atlassian YouTube channel. Downtime, we're all impacted by it, whether individually. I think I was in Europe last time where I couldn't get to an ATM because they had that major outage that impacted a lot of Europe. So we've been on the receiving end. We've also been in working with teams. I've been on many 3 a.m. phone calls back in the day when we did phone bridges before chat ops. But it has a significant impact. It's a financial impact. And you saw the exciting announcement from Atlassian this week with Jira Ops, and now the Ops Genie team being a part of Atlassian. And our investment in IT to be able to make an impact here to where we can reduce that time as well as prevent that. And so when I think about working with IT operations teams, I'm always looking at where are we at in the phase of a major outage? And, is it in some aspect here, where can we improve upon this? It's interesting, and this was a Gartner study, they found that in the investigation phase, that's where teams spend 70% of their time. So what can I do in that aspect, and there's some other parts I want to talk about as well, to help them improve? And also on the closure side, am I learning from my outages? And so I'm going to talk about a couple of these capability. Here's the 4 key areas. First of all, faster MTTR. Do you have a game plan in place that expedites your response to major outages? Do you have something published that if you have someone new joining your IT operations team, that they can come on board and quickly learn and understand the way that the team's working? Do you have runbooks published for your major services that if I'm the first on-call agent touching that, I can go through that runbook and potentially be the first one helping and resolve that? Do you have effective communications in place? This is so key and critical. I don't have time to dive into this one, but what we find is a lot of teams don't have that. They rely on other means, email, something through the organization, and they're inundated with issues being reported by end users once the outage is actually occurring. And so that's having a plan in place, how you'll communicate, your templates for those. That's where status page really comes in around that. But it goes beyond the technology. It also goes to how's the team set up in the way that they'll respond to that as part of your plan. Open collaboration, what I just talked about in the previous one, being able to bring a chat ops strategy to your incident response. And then the final one, this is an interesting one that I'll spend some time with, continuous learning, continuous improvement. I'm a big proponent of ITIL in that I've seen the value for a problem management process and an incident management process, but they're 2 separate teams, oftentimes working in 2 separate tools. I have now started to see where teams are collapsing that capability to where we work much closer together, especially as it relates to outages that are occurring and preventing those outages, taking learnings and improving that service. So I'll talk about those 2. But first of all, a game plan. So what does a helicopter have to do with an incident? Well, it goes back to my early days. Before I got into technology, I used to fly around in the back of these helicopters and do search and rescue with the Coast Guard in the US. And one thing that's always stuck with me is the game plan that we had for a rescue. We trained to it. We had full documentation to where whenever we would go out, and it was always, you didn't know what you were getting into, you knew exactly what you were going to do. You had a full checklist. You would go through it, and guess what? We didn't read that checklist just once. We trained on it every single time we went out. And that stuck with me. It carried with me into my consulting days that I always would ask a customer, I said, what is your game plan? Where is it documented? I do a lot of process consulting in my ITSM days. And so having a major incident blueprint is so critical. I pulled this out of a couple examples I have, and I don't know if you saw during the keynote when we announced the Jira operations. Drawing a blank there. We actually had a URL up where you can get our blueprint that Atlassian has. And a lot of these are based on it. So have you clearly defined what a major incident is? Do you have a documented process for that incident? And do you have workflows that actually support it? Inside of there, what is your communications plan? Not how, who you'll communicate with, but what's the format? What's the cadence for that? So there's a lot of details in here that you want to establish that you would be able to put in place that your team can follow. Do you have the best resources responding to incidents? They're not always going to be in the IT operations team. And this is where level Z starts to come in. Do you have the team of teams in place that will help you effectively respond? One thing I've learned a lot from Atlassian is the way that we pull across different teams when there is an outage going on, that they can effectively, in our SRE teams, respond to that. I'm going to talk about this next one in a few minutes here. Do you conduct PIRs? Many teams do not, and that is a critical aspect to success. Do you publish and share your learnings, both internally and possibly externally? And the last one, back to the helicopter, do you run a major simulation drill? At least once a quarter, once a month. Once a week, does a team sit down and say, all right, we got this major outage going on, how do we respond? And you talk through it. It's almost like you're doing a play out of one of our playbooks. So these are critical things to take away. Hopefully go back and ask your team saying, what do we have in place for a blueprint? And start to do your research and to get this in and document it and work through it with your teams. It sets you up for success. So I'm going to fast forward. There's a lot in there that I cover in the other presentation online. Hope you get a chance to watch that. It's on my Atlassian YouTube channel. I posted it up there. But I picked this one because this is so important. Most of the other ITSM vendors I've worked with, you have, 4 or 5 fields. You document the incident. We're done. Service is back up. I'm moving on, right? Might come back. Hopefully someone runs a report. Manager runs a report. Great, I got a great report. But what does that really tell me? What were the learnings? And what we do is we actually leave a lot of the critical learnings. They're still locked in the system. They're still locked with the teams out there. In fact, Google found out that 70% of incident reviews are forgotten because they don't do them. And so this is a critical aspect that you could start doing tomorrow within your teams. To be able to take and create a PIR, whether you do it in Jira, you do it in Confluence. Jira Ops has that built into the new application that we've released. But it's finding a way that your strategy is built in that you're going to go ahead and capture these learnings, both as you're going through the incident as well as afterwards. So here's a key thing on a PIR. What is it? Well, it's really about learning and preventing and improve upon the service. So I want to understand all the contributing factors of the root cause of it. I want to document this so that in the future I can come back to it, whether it's a known error that I publish that might come out of a problem investigation. I want to implement an effective way to get the actions in there and then reduce the likelihood of it reoccurring. But ultimately, I want to improve upon the service. So PRRs is an example I've seen customer examples, I've seen in Atlassian. This is an example that's within Confluence. The key on this is really to find out what's the fault, the impact, and work as a team. Because the other thing you have to overcome as a cultural layer is I'm going to point at someone that was their fault. It was the DBA. No, it was the application administrator. It happened. Let's learn from it. So that's the other thing you have to overcome. But once you do and you're able to get to the 5 whys and be able to answer those, you may very well unlock a bug fix that goes into the software backlog that not only prevents in the future, you may introduce a service improvement. And this is where continuous improvement comes in. And it's a really key aspect of PIRs. So here's a couple things. First of all, it's really key in the cultural aspect. Diffuse the blame game. Set the stage that we're not here to blame anyone, to lay fault at this. The poor person that did the change to the AWS configuration in the US and took down the East Coast of the US, our major outages of AWS last year. I love reading their PIR, their post on that, and what they learned from it. Someone made a mistake in that, but they were just doing their job. So how can I overcome that? So establish a culture where they want to learn, where they're looking to go through and pick up on those things. And then provide a repeatable process. I think that's the key part of it. Just like the game plan, a part of your blueprint, in the blueprint it says, here is our PIR process. And it's not something that's set in stone starting out. It's something that you learn from and improve upon over time. Establish your incident timeline. One thing I love about Jira Ops has already done that for us. You can do this in many different ways, but what is your timeline that you can get that into the learning document? And then finally, create and revise knowledge, whether it's KBs, known errors, run books. One thing I really didn't get a chance to do in here in this slide presentation is taking your troubleshooting guides and publishing them in Confluence's run books. Then creating preventive actions. This is where it's bringing IT and software teams closer together. And then finally publishing them, whether it's internally to your teams, but I also know customers that they actually will publish it externally via status page or other message to share that with their customer. One, it shares the learning across teams, and it gains trust of your stakeholders. Okay, a couple minutes here, we're going to cover change management. I saved this one for last because can be one of the, it's the sticking point in IT. It's got a lot of complexity. One, because of the fact that IT is the gatekeeper for changes to the infrastructure. What's the cost of a failure? And you see it up there, it's very high. And so what does IT want to do? They're risk averse. I want to prevent those changes that are going to cause that kind of impact. Well, in this day and age, as our infrastructure has changed, yeah, that might have been true when we're on the left-hand side in probably the early 2000s. We are more on the right-hand side there, and so our job as IT has become much easier in the way that we can think more about infrastructure as code and how we want to manage those changes. So as we think about with an incident, we think about a process. Where can we improve in our change process across here? How do we introduce ways of agile working within the way that teams work within change management? And the other thing that we want to look at is how do we balance these? We definitely have to, stability, risk, security, compliance, but I have to balance that out with the needs of the business. So I lost my screen here, but I think it's still there. So 4 things. There we go. First of all, be at the speed of the business. It's coming at me faster, so how can I do this? One thing I just saw recently in a DevOps presentation is that they're bringing the security teams, embedding them directly into the process. That allows me to move at the speed of the business because they're closer to it. Automate standard changes. I just talked to a customer here this week. They've automated well over 50% of their changes. They moved off a legacy ITSM system. They're now live on Jira Service Desk with all of their IT changes flowing through there. Streamlining approvals, one of the things, approvals are still important. CAB approvals are not going to go away. How can I introduce peer reviews in that? We'll talk about that in just a second. Reducing risk is also a part of this. How can I de-risk the change? Moving it into smaller components. As I move towards more infrastructure as code, I can now move these smaller changes through the process faster and potentially even make them pre-approved and automated. And then finally, what we talked about, PIRs, you should be doing the same thing in all of your major changes. So automation, this one right here, I'm just finding so many uses for this, and I learn a lot from customers. Being able to introduce automation in small little ways that improve over time, whether it's updating a change. One is attaching the process and the procedure they will follow when the change is created. So think about ways that you can introduce automation into your process. Finally, breaking down the barriers, being able to centralize your plans, bring them in a collaborative review. Let me jump forward here for sake of time. So being able to take your detailed change plans, move them into Confluence. By doing this, and the customer I was talking to that did this, they found that their CAB approvals went virtual and they were less time consuming because of the comments and the way that the teams interact within Confluence, because these very comprehensive changes are now in a place that we can centrally collaborate in one place. So key learnings here, really just outside thinking in the way that we want to think about change management. The traditional way is very heavy. How can we bring this in and work across multiple teams to deliver a more streamlined process? Identify ways that we can bring automation. Leveraging Kanban boards. I'm starting to see teams use Trello to be able to have their flow of changes visible across the organization. So a couple of things there. We found with Agile teams, first of all, they're much more flexible in the way that they'll work and the way that they're structured. They actually can take an increased velocity of work because the way I can manage and understand what's coming at them, and they're much more business aligned. We talked quite a bit about this in the white paper that we'll mention in a few minutes. So the great thing with Atlassian, it's very adaptable for the tools that you can choose to fit your needs, whether Service Desk and Confluence we're putting together, and in the marketplace. I was just talking to a customer last week where the marketplace was really key to their delivery. In fact, they complimented, it allows us to keep our costs lower. They moved off of ServiceNow, and it was very significant. They were choosing the things they needed instead of having a lot of features that just sat on the shelf that they never needed. So I'm going to hand back to my colleague, Vidhu, and he'll wrap us up here real quick.
Hello. Hello. All right. Can you hear me? Okay. So thanks, Paul. That was really insightful. Just to bring the whole point back and drive it home, it's ultimately about people, process, and technology. People represents culture, process is the work you do, and tools are just the way to get there. So with that, we want to empower you with the parts of the people and culture. So you can go to Atlassian.com and search for playbooks. The incident response playbook with Jira Ops has been posted yesterday. So if that is something your teams want to look into, that's great. But you have other resources like health monitors and planning and cultural things that you can implement with your teams right when you get back to your house and the teams after the summit. All right, so we have a white paper. So this was just the tip of the iceberg, but this white paper digs deep into different areas around IT service management with no-nonsense tips to get stuff done. So with that, I'd like to thank you and bring Paul on stage so we can have a few questions.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll have Paul and Vidhu go outside, and you can ask them questions out there. Does anyone have a question?
And we're also at the ITSM booth later on today, or
Yeah.
all day today, so if
Yeah,
you
we
want to
can
stop
see you
by.
at the booth. Love to hear your
Any
stories.
questions? No? Yes? No?
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wish I had 2 hours to talk about this topic. There's so much more that. Thank you.
Sorry, this is boring. Could you just put the download slide back up?
Yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
I have cards here with the link to the white paper also.
Yeah.
A
That would be
QR
good.
code, yeah.
That would be good. Hopefully, it gives you some ideas to take away, and you know, 1 or 2 things you can go back in your team and say, let's just try this. That's the great thing of Agile, in that we can, you know, kind of break out of old ways of working and find new ways. And I find that teams actually do that. They like it. Yeah.
Hey, sorry. Just a quick question. On the portal and everything, we use it, the team. And last Christmas, we took the move to completely ban email support, so as to drive it all through the portal. Is that something you're seeing more of, or are we probably being a bit unfriendly with that?
No, because we know how email will never go away, but it's not the most efficient way of communicating. But if that's your least, you know, it's what I have available, I'm going to reach out to IT, or I don't know. So, but what we have found, I think it's 30-40% in the deployment of Service Desk. That's the reduction in email coming into the team. So the email channel, I don't think will ever go away. The great thing is that we've added automation. Well, it's been there for a while. Automation that you can parse and be able to, you know, get information out of that and maybe act on it in a different way. So good question on that. So it's phenomenal. And some teams aren't able to go there because the culture isn't set around, you know, making that change. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say on email?
No, I think we're good. We'll just meet them at the booth.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you very much,
Thank
everyone.
you very much.
Appreciate
Enjoy the rest
it.
of the summit. Come see us at the booth if you have any
I'll
questions.
leave these business cards up here with them. You can come get one. Please rate the session in the app. We really appreciate it. And come visit the ITSM booth.
Thank you.